Hey guys, wanted to give you guys some notes on Fahrenheit 451 since we're going to start reading that this week. Initially, the plan was to read sections to you and kind of talk through it like we would in class, but because of some copyright issues, and I already sent you a PDF of the book, but I feel like it would be better if I didn't do that. And so this way you guys can read and then check these lectures out for some notes. All right. I would read with the book in hand. So like I've got mine right here. I would have my book, and as I talked about stuff, I'd mark it, because if you just watch these videos, you're going to have no idea what we're talking about. All right. So the first thing you guys were asked to read, that each video is going to cover those sections, hopefully. The first section is the first 6 or so pages on your PDF of the first chapter titled The Hearth and the Salamander. And we're going to talk more about what both of those mean later in the book. But let's get started with the first little section here. And I realize the PDF's not broken up into sections the way the book is, so that's going to be a bit of a problem for some of you, but I'll help let you know what. The first section is actually very small. And of course, one of the things Bradbury is excellent at is the one sentence paragraph, and this is really meant to draw your attention to it. Now, like I said, you guys don't want to do that in your essays, but in fiction, especially when it's purposeful, this can be a really good tool. The very first sentence in the book is "It was a pleasure to burn." All right, and this sums up so much of the early part of this book. The goal in you know and when you're reading, a lot of things you want to do is look for these weird sentences or weird ideas or weird concepts, because it's easy for an author to say something like, burning was painful, and you really don't need to point that out because we all know it. But to see a weird sentence like "it was a pleasure to burn" lets us know something weird is happening here with this character. So the guy we see right here at the beginning, although they don't mention his name yet, is our protagonist. He's a guy named Guy Montag. All right. So after that first sentence, we get treated to a lot of really good description. Now, Bradbury can turn on the description when he chooses. He doesn't always, but when he wants to, he really can. So we get a lot here about how much this guy likes burning things. Really disturbing imagery. You get things like it's a special pleasure to see things eaten. Then we get things like, let's see, his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. You get things like he wanted, above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace while flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. And then the ending of this section is really where you see this. This Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. Notice that smile. And then, it says he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never, ever went away as long as he remembered. So that's the ending of the first section. Let's talk about that, though. If you don't know what this book's about, some of you don't, this is disturbing. You get this image of this man who likes to burn things, but what you're going to find out as you read further is that this is actually a job in this kind of dystopian world, and it was to find houses that had books and burn them. That was the job of firemen back then. We see later that their houses are actually fireproofed. It's in this section now. I'm not spoiling anything. If you read like you were supposed to, you already knew that. But so firemen didn't have a job as far as putting out fires. What they did was they started them when they found a house with books. And this guy really likes burning stuff. And, people today, if someone said this about wanting to burn things, we would think they were crazy. So this is a really interesting section. Now, I want you to specifically highlight, or, at least make notes in your on your book about that his smile, because we're going to see that change in this next section. There's going to be a big difference in that right away. All right. So as we get into the second section, we see some more of how happy he is. You get phrases like he showered luxuriously and he's whistling. This is a man that enjoys what he does. On the test, I'll ask you about how much he liked his job, and it's one of the most missed questions because people put he enjoyed it, but the real answer is that he loves this job. There's a difference in him. My wife's a nurse. She enjoys her job most days, but she doesn't love it all the time. So, this guy loves his job. He's whistling on the way home from work. This guy loves it. You also get some weird imagery in here of how peaceful their world is. This is the only time you'll see this. Here's the sentence. He let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking a little at all about nothing in particular. The idea of it wafting him out of the air makes it sound peaceful and serene, and that is not their world. But then you got that sentence I just read. He walked to the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. This is their world. It's the idea that people just do without thinking. Thinking's not something that's a big deal in the world of Fahrenheit 451. And when Bradbury wrote this back in the 50s, he started getting worried that he was seeing this trend. And what's sad is, yep, we're kind of doing that very thing. All right. All right, let's get a little bit more. You go a little farther, and just some more description, and then you get another one of those one-sentence paragraphs where it says he turned the corner. All right, and as he turns the corner, we're going to get a major plot switch as we get the second character introduced, and the major character, and the character is Clarice McClellan. Clarice is going to represent one of three guides Montag sees. There's 3 chapters in the book, 3 guides. Each chapter introduces us to a new person who helps guide Montag to becoming awoken to what is going on in his world. Now, Clarice is the one who's going to get him to first start looking. All right. When Clarice enters, you get a lot of weird imagery, and I want to point something out to you. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 references to the color white in this paragraph with her. The paragraph that starts, "The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement." And there's your first one, by the way. Moonlight is kind of a whitish color in literature, typically, the way they describe it. You also get that her face was slender and milk white. You see a look of pale surprise, again, white. Her dress is white, and then you see a white stir of her face. Now, when an author repeats things like this, you have to think that it's there for a reason. So the repetition of white for Clarice is about innocence. In the second chapter, the next guide, a guy named Faber, is going to come in, and we're going to see white again with him. But that time, white means something different. It means fear. And one of the things you want to learn is that colors don't always have the exact same symbolism. All right, they have similar ones, but you can see like white can be innocent, it can be purity, it can be fear. So we want to make sure that we look at those anytime they're repeated, particularly. All right, you see white 5 times in here, it's definitely on purpose. So Clarice is a 17-year-old girl, and she walks with Montag to her house. She lives next door to him, and they have a really interesting conversation. She points out right away something that, again, if you have had no guidance on this book, that is kind of an odd statement. She mentions that he's a fireman. She says it almost like she's disgusted a little bit. The line is, "You must be," she raised her eyes from her professional symbols, "the fireman," and her voice trails off. It's like a little sense of disappointment. Again, in our world, firemen are people we, respect and applaud. In their world, they're scary. These are people that burn things. And then they say things like this. Listen to what Montag says. He says, it's after Clarice says she could tell he was a fireman with her eyes shut. He says, "What, the smell of kerosene? My wife always complains," he laughed. "You never wash it off completely." And then if you skip a paragraph, he says, "Kerosene," he said, "became, because the silence had lengthened, is nothing but perfume to me." Now that's disturbing. I don't know if you ever smelled kerosene. It doesn't smell good. By the way, this has got payoff later. So be ready for there to be more about this particular thing at a later date. All right. By the way, Clarice doesn't buy that. She's like, does it really? I mean, she really calls him on it because Montag represents the way a lot of you think. You just say stuff without really realizing what it means and what it entails. And our world's full of that. Think about right now with all the things we have going around, how many times people quickly just type something in their computer and not realize the damage it has. So, Bradbury was big on words and understanding that words have meaning. And that is what, this part is about. Our words matter. You don't just say stuff, small talk. There's no purpose in that. All right. They keep walking. You get a little bit of Clarice's, who she is. She says, here's a Clarice paragraph. It says, "I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age," he said, "always say 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things and sometimes stay up all night walking and watch the sunrise." All right, so you get this image of, so what? She likes to walk around and look at things. You're going to find out in their world that's very weird. In fact, she's going to mention in just a few paragraphs that her uncle was arrested for being a pedestrian. People don't go out and walk. Look out now with this quarantine going on. This would be totally normal in their world. People just didn't get out and do things like that. They got home, they sat down in front of their TVs, and that was it. And really stunted their thinking. So Clarice is different than these people, okay? She also says something weird. She says, "I'm not afraid of you at all." The fact that she says that indicates that they do fear firemen in their world. And the fact that she says that indicates that, there's, again, something weird, like I said at the beginning of this, that you need to pay attention to. All right. Okay. Montag seems to have this weird obsession with her starting right after that line. I want you to understand that in this book, Montag does not have a crush on a 17-year-old girl. That is not what's going on. It's that she's different, than everyone he knows. All right, and as you're going to see, the people in his world are pretty sorry people. All right. She asks two important questions here before Montag gets to his house. She asks him if he reads any of the books he burns, which of course he immediately laughs off without thinking. Think about how quickly we respond to people when they say stuff without actually thinking about it. All right. He laughs like, ha ha ha, doesn't realize that there's a lot of depth to that question. All right. Then they point out the thing about the houses that I mentioned earlier. She asked, did you, was there one time where houses were fireproof and weren't fireproof? I apologize. And that people actually put fires out back then. And Montag laughs like that's the stupidest thing. Now, I want you to understand, this world is supposed to be our world, just in the near future. So we read this knowing that houses did burn down. So what we're seeing here is Bradbury showing us how easily wording and just telling people things can change history. Think about how that works. You guys don't study. I mean, you have a history class. We could tell you just about anything in it, and you'd believe it. And so we're seeing that this is the byproduct of that. All right. Now, but the important thing, and I'm skipping a little here because my video is getting a little long. Before Clarice leaves Montag, she asks the key question. If we're looking at a plot map, you've got your exposition, and then right there before the rising action begins, you have that inciting incident. And here's what it is. Clarice looks at him and says, "Are you happy?" And then Montag stops, and when he looks, she's gone. She didn't wait for an answer. The reason is she doesn't want an answer. She wants him to think about whether he's happy or not. Okay? And Bradbury wasn't trying to write a super long book, so immediately as we enter the next section of this book, which this would be the third section if you're following in the book and not in the PDF, Montag starts making fun of it. He's like, like I'm not happy. Of course I'm happy. I mean, we just saw him whistling when he on his way home from work. But then as he goes into his bedroom, he looks at his wife laying there in the bed, and there's a lot of weird imagery about it being tomb-like. He says a mausoleum, it's cold, there's no one in there, but of course his wife is in there. There's a lot of death imagery to it and a lot of cold imagery, and it's really sad, and you realize this guy's exceptionally unhappy. In fact, he realizes it too. He says he was not happy. He was not happy. Notice the two times. They're making sure we get that. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going back to knock on her door and ask for it back. So by sitting here and thinking about whether he's happy or not, he's realized he's not. And once you realize that, everything changes. You can't take that back. You have to. Once you realize, hey, my life's not right, everything changes. We've got a lot of people figuring that out right now, as a lot of us are going through, traumatic changes in our lives, and a lot of people are realizing that, that they thought they were happy, but they're not, and they're definitely not happy now. So they're realizing that when things get back to normal, some changes are going to be made. All right. Now, we need some kind of rising action here. So what we come into is Montag comes across, as he's walking to his bed, he kicks something on the floor and he hears it clatter away, and he kind of thinks he knows what it is. He looks at his wife, who obviously has swallowed a ton of sleeping pills and has, tried to kill herself. The section ends with him calling the hospital to come get her, and he hears something. Probably the part that confused you the most if you read it. There's this little actually kind of big paragraph right before the end where you hear something about jets flying over and things like that. It's one of the style choices Bradbury uses that I don't like, to be honest with you. Several times he's going to drop these jets in there, and what they are is there to point out that there's some warfare happening around their ears right now. One of the hallmarks of dystopian fiction is war weariness. Almost every dystopian novel, there's some sort of war going on, and it just seems to be that people get used to it, and it kind of causes their mentality to be, sort of depressed, because there's this constant warfare surrounding them. So Bradbury makes use of that. It's not a major part until the very end of the book, but he likes to interject it at times, and it's really awkward since there was no lead up to it. So as you finish this section, we've been introduced to Clarice and Montag, two main characters. You've seen Mildred, that's his wife. We know that, the inciting incident has occurred with being asked, "Are you happy?" And this book is about how is he going to find his happiness now. And then you also get that our first major plot hurdle, that Mildred has tried to kill herself. So as we start the next section, we're going to see the results of that situation. Spoiler, she did not pull it off. Montag's going to save her. But when you learn more about this character, you might wish she had, because she is one of the all-time worst characters in literature, in my opinion. So, well, I hope you've enjoyed the book so far. I realize it's a little bit dry so far. Trust me, it will pick up. First chapter of this book is my favorite. When we get towards the end with Beatty, I'm really excited about that. So I hope you enjoyed it. While from this chapter, what I want you to think about is if someone was to ask you, are you happy? What would your answer be? Your actual answer, not your knee jerk, yes, I'm happy. But what would it really be? And then if you said yes, what is it about your life that makes you happy? If you say no, why not? What can we do to change that? All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this, and gonna see about making that other video. If I don't have it up, you guys can go ahead and read ahead and just come back and check these videos out later. I'm gonna try to get them all out by Monday, but at 70 pages in my book, so we may not get there all the way. Okay. All right. I hope you guys are having a great night. I hope you're safe. I hope your families are safe. I'm praying for each of you, and I love all of you.